it's an interesting thing about how our brains work, and how we're raised to believe certain things, and then when we want to change those beliefs, there's the intellectual side of your brain which can change right away. All right, but then there's those hardwired emotional responses that take a long time to unlearn. And I experienced some of that. This is where I began to realize that, being poly was giving me the opportunity to explore so much more of myself.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Well, welcome to episode 338. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an amazing conversation with Danielle. Danielle's been practicing ethical non-monogamy for about the last 9 years. However, as you'll see, he's really identified with it his whole life.
He was in a monogamous relationship for about 18 years. And when that relationship transitioned actually into a friendship, I think it sort of spurred the idea that maybe we could do relationships differently. And so Daniel talks through the last few years of his sort of non-monogamous awakening and his polycules and all of the different things that he's sort of learned about himself and gone through over the last couple of years.
Yeah, he shares a beautiful journey of both self-discovery and growth.
Yeah. So thank you, Daniel, for reaching out, for coming on the show, and for your patience in us getting this out there.
Yes, we appreciate that as well. And today is a special day.
It is a special day. Happy anniversary, Emma.
Happy anniversary, Finn.
That's 6 years of podcasting together. I mean, officially it was May 2nd. Today's May 1st, but can't get much closer.
It's close enough. It's close enough.
Did you ever think we'd be here 6 years later?
337 episodes in.
337.
I guess besides the first one.
And all the Focus Fridays. And so we're close to 350, maybe 360 total.
That's true because of all the other ones. Yes. Yeah. So a lot of episodes, 6 years in. No, I did not think we'd be here, but I sure am damn happy we are.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. I had schemes and plots in my brain to get us here.
I think we both did. I think it was but we didn't know what it would turn into. We both had hopes, and we were like, and who knows what this will actually turn into.
I think what I didn't expect was the community piece to be born out of this, and to really really feel how much that's actually impacted us on a personal level, and how much we've seen it grow and impact everybody who's part of it.
Yes. On that note, thank you, everyone who has been part of the community, who has been a listener, who has been shared their story. There's so many of you who have contributed or walked paths next to us, with us on this journey.
Supported us, been there for us as we're crying. We've been there for you while you're crying. It's been an amazing 6 years.
Yeah, and it has been.
I think what's also really cool is some of our community members today were there on day one. They've been there the whole ride.
Yes.
Pretty amazing. And now we're close to 300 members. So blown away.
Yeah. I was just say it's been a totally amazing ride.
Yeah. Mind blown.
Mind blown.
I also want to say thank you to anybody who has ever come on the show, maybe that's not part of our community. Just in general, 338 at least stories that we've told on this podcast. Some of you have come on and done group therapy in front of thousands of people. And we've had experts from all across the world come on and share about different topics. So thank you to everybody there. Thank you to anybody who's ever used the links on our website to buy different things that support the show, primarily stdcheck.com. Yeah.
Or if you bought a t-shirt.
That one feeds us most months.
Yeah.
And buying t-shirts. So thank you to everybody. You have no idea how much your support means to us.
Yes.
Oh, and to the 6 premium subscribers out there. There might be 7 now. I don't know.
On that note, for anyone who is a premium subscriber, we're going to jump into the interview with Daniel now.
Can we say one more thank you, though?
Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next year for lucky number 7. And we hope to just keep doing this.
But
so thank you all for your support to get here and for telling other people. Maybe you haven't used any of the links and you just tell everybody out there. That's wonderful too. Thank you.
We can't believe we've made it 6 years, and we would not have been able to do that without every single one of you.
Okay. Sorry I interrupted that perfect transition about the premium subscribers. It was beautifully set up, and then I fucked it all up.
It's all good. It's all good. Anyway, for anyone who is a premium subscriber, we will jump into the interview with Daniel now. And for anyone else, we are going to do a few announcements. First up, if you're not familiar with the premium subscription, it's really easy to get familiar with it. Just go to the homepage at normalizingnonmonogamy.com, scroll down on the homepage, and you can click and sign up there. And you get to skip these announcements up front, but don't worry, you still get the important dates in the outro.
The other thing we wanted to remind you about, if you want to be part of that group of people in our virtual community who we thank effusively 1 year from now, it's a great time to join. Best time actually is now.
Yeah.
So head over to the website that you're already at, scroll back up to the top, click on the community tab. You can learn a little bit more about it there. You can join for $5 a month, and we would love to see you in there with the other 300 amazing people from around the world who love and support one another, have great times, laugh, all the things. And we do it all in an online platform all day, every day, a platform called Mighty Networks. It's an app on your telephone, right at your fingertips.
Yes. And you can sign up and join us.
And we'll see you in there.
Also, a reminder to check out our favorite way to get tested for STIs. It is stdcheck.com. It is the service that Finn and I use. It is fast and simple, discreet. And by using the links on our webpage on the resources tab, you get $10 off making a 10-panel test, only $129. Plus, you support the show and you get to know your sexual health status. So
and next year, we will say thank you.
Well, thank you right now. Thank you in advance.
Thank you in advance. And next year, thank you for starting now, moving forward.
Yes.
I'm really holding this thank you over their head as incentive. Yeah.
It's I mean, any incentive, right?
All right. The last thing we want to tell you all, please send us an email, send us a voicemail. We'd love to hear your feedback on the show. We'd love to help you answer any questions you have. Me, Shay, and I answer those once a month on our Ask Us Anything episodes that we just had a few days ago, but we have another one coming up in June, May. I don't know what month it is.
We have another one coming up in May.
We have one every month. So send us your questions if you'd like those to be answered. And also, if you would love to come on the show, we would love to have you come on the show. Daniel's just a regular old amazing human who reached out to us, just like most of our guests. So please reach out to us. We'd love to have you on the show.
And with that, we'll jump into the interview with Daniel. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel. We're excited to talk to you. I know we have a little bit of background, but not much. So we're excited to dive in and learn all about you. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Without much further ado, would you like to introduce yourselves to us and to the listeners? We don't know much about you, even though we've been playing email tag for like 6 months to try to get this. We're finally here. So we're excited.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, sure. Certainly. My name is Daniel, or Dan, as some people like to call me. I've been openly practicing polyamory for, I'm going to say, between 8 and 9 years, although more accurately, I like to say that I was, like everybody else, I was born polyamorous. I just learned to stop conforming to monogamy around 8 years ago. So right now, I have one partner. We don't like to think of ourselves as hierarchical, but, for looser terms, I've used the term primary, but the more accurate term is anchor partner. At one point, we were in a polycule of 5 people, and, that was enjoyable while it lasted. As of right now, it's just the 2 of us. I don't know what else to say. Let's see. Should I give the whole story, the full story, going way back to when?
Okay. Well, let's go back in time. Let's start back at the beginning, and we'll work through time together.
Okay.
And I also just wanted to point out before we do that, I noticed in your email that you rephrased, instead of normalizing non-monogamy, you had shared denormalizing monogamy. And
no, I'm glad you brought that up, and I don't know if that was going to come up in the discussion now or later, but it's my belief is, first of all, I'm an open book. So, and I'm the kind of person that, once I get into something, I'm not a very private person, so I'll talk about these things a lot. But there have been 2 books in my life that have been very influential, at least recently. One of them was Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan, and the other was Our Inner Ape by Franz de Waal. And both of them, as I was exploring being polyamorous more and more, the engineer and scientist in me always goes back to like trying to understand why in human nature. So I got very into anthropology and primatology. So that's when I began to realize, it's actually, it's, the culture that we're living in right now is so unnatural from so many different perspectives. When I found your podcast normalizing non-monogamy, I'm like, that's great, but what about taking it a step further? And say, well, why don't we? I don't want to denormalize monogamy. I want to denormalize the concept that it's the default option, that it's the only normal, default option. Really, at some point, I would love it if humanity could just completely step away from all labels and just say, hey, love is love, relationships are relationships, whatever it is, and why have to actually define a normal?
Yeah. Figure out what works for you, and that's your normal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I think you're talking to the right people today. So here we go.
Yeah.
So we'd love to go back in time and kind of know, what is your history with all of this?
Sure, certainly. So I will go back in time. I've decided after, I've let people in my life know I was going to be doing this podcast, and I wasn't going to mention any names, and I wasn't going to go into any various details with regards to them. So, I will do that. I've decided I'm going to refer to people by a letter within their name, not even the first letter of their name. So we shall go with this. So I was in a monogamous relationship with A for 18 years. I have a 21-year-old daughter with her, and we actually had we had a very, very great relationship, for a very, very long time. And without going into too much details, I will say that our intimate life was spicy, and we would often, while together, fantasize about maybe like being in groups or this other stuff. But that was, with us, that was just fantasization. It never ever got real, and I kind of knew it never would be real. That was all just part of like spicing things up, and it was fun. But here's the interesting thing: is that I found I was excited about the idea of like watching her with other people. And I would have conversations with friends about this, and they'd be like, no way, no, I could never do that. I wouldn't. And then, like, the triggering phrase, I would never let my wife, girlfriend, whatever, do this or do that. And I'm like, you don't own them. And I started at a long time ago really questioning the normal or conventional relationship narrative that once two people get together, that now all of a sudden they have to restrict each other from doing things. All right, and that alone never made sense to me, but I accepted it, because this is what we're taught. Well, at some point, after a couple of periods in my life that where we changed. I basically went through a period of depression related to a business loss and everything like that. When I came out of it, we were both very, very different people. And that's when, like, she told me that she wasn't feeling the same about me, and we went to therapy for about 6 months. And we just decided, look, the relationship's over, but we're always going to be friends. Okay, so to this day, we are friends. Actually, it's interesting how that turned out, because I have a cousin in Spain. My father was from Spain, so I have lots of cousins over there. And he and his wife got divorced back in the late 90s. But to this very, very day, they're both very good friends. And she even still comes to family functions and even hangs out with his girlfriend. And I remember there was around the time my ex and I were splitting up, we were visiting Spain that time. And I had no idea. I'm like sitting down watching a Barcelona soccer match. And in the background, I had no idea she was sitting down with my cousin and his ex-wife, asking them, hey, how did you guys do this? So even she really, wanted to, like, just, make sure that, like, just because our relationship was over didn't mean we were like completely over. So that was like, the beginning of the end of my monogamous life. And after that, I basically went on the dating apps, did a lot of serial monogamous dating and everything, and did that for a while. And then I began to feel like, this isn't working. I've always felt this way. I've always felt that, like, monogamy isn't right. I'm starting to learn more and more about this thing called polyamory, which apparently is hidden from us most of our lives, and it's kept in the shadows. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to identify myself as non-monogamous. I changed all my dating profiles, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I meet my current partner, and we've been together. It'll actually be, what is today? February 2nd. It'll be 6 years, 8 days from now that we've been together. What's interesting is that at the time we started dating, within 3 days of us started dating, she also started dating. I'll call him G. All right, so she was dating G and myself for a while, and at some point, I remember she set up something where G and I were going to meet. We were going to meet after work and hang out. And so he met me, after work in the city. We went to go play ping pong and have a few beers, and then later shoot some pool and everything. And over time, we developed a friendship, and I started to feel like, this does feel right. That, like, it's, I'm happy that I'm with somebody who can get their needs met that I can't fulfill with somebody else, and I'm also able to hang out with this person and really, also have a relationship with that person. And I began to realize that, oh, that's called kitchen table poly. And I'm like, I love this. That's, why isn't every relationship like this? It's like, but that said, I will be honest though, because it wasn't, it's an interesting thing about like, how our brains work, and how we're raised to believe certain things, and then when we want to change those beliefs, there's the intellectual side of your brain, which can change right away. All right, but then
Yep.
there's those hardwired emotional responses that take a long time to unlearn, and I experienced some of that. One example was, so back in 2018, I was traveling every week down to DC. My work has me traveling a lot, and of course, traveling for work has its own issues, but also being taken away from the people that you want to be with is a big one. And at one point, I started to feel a little jealous that my partner was spending so much time with G, and I started, like, exploring that, and I'm like, okay. I began to realize, number one, the big part of that is that I'm still trying to unlearn that hardwired programming. But the other part was, well, I'm not really angry at him or her. I'm angry at the fact that I have to travel every week, and I'm just misplacing that, you know, that misery.
Mhm.
So, and this is where I began to realize that, like, being poly was giving me the opportunity to explore so much more of myself,
Yeah.
of, like, these emotional responses that were conditioned, that are not natural. I'm beginning to understand them.
Yeah.
Another example was, while I was down in DC at one time, I did end up meeting somebody down there. I spent one night with this person, had a wonderful time, and I felt nervous about telling my partner about it, right? And of course, I knew intellectually she's going to be like, "Oh, I'm so happy for you. That's great. I'm great. You had a good time." But still, that hardwired sense of, like, oh, you know, you're so used to being in relationships where, like, you're expecting a negative reaction of, even, from you even noticing or acknowledging anybody else.
Yeah.
So, how do I just come out and say, oh, I just had this intimate moment, it was great? So that was like the beginning of that, and it was a real, you know uh turning point in my life, where I was beginning to realize this dynamic that I'd once only thought about and always intellectually felt that this is what the normal should be, but yet still fighting that hardwired programming was
Totally.
so
Mhm.
challenging. And
Yeah. Well, and programming that you had been, like, living for a lot of your life.
Yeah, the
yeah,
social conditioning is so real. I love that you brought that up, Daniel, because you talked about, like, yeah, I sort of transitioned the relationship with we'll call your co-parent A, And a few weeks later, you're like, well, I'm going to try non-monogamy, and you jump into it. And like you said, it's like intellectually, it makes sense. You're like, this is me. I've been looking for this forever. And then you start to hit the like, oh shit, but there's so much of this programming that's been just embedded in me that you have to then, you're coming up against it, first of all, like your own feelings. And then, I mean, for myself, I will say, like, I project those own feelings onto somebody else. That's why it's hard for me sometimes to tell somebody, because I'm like, oh, well, I'm afraid if they're going to react like I might feel or whatever. And so then you just get all twisted up in it.
Yeah, exactly. And, what's interesting now is, where I am now, I told you about things that happened about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Where I am now, I did mention earlier, I'm an open book. I talk openly, and so if I'm out at a restaurant or a bar and I strike up a conversation with somebody, or even at work striking up a conversation, they ask me about family, I don't beat around the bush. I just come right out and say it. Now that said, okay, I understand there's a lot of people who can't do this. I mean, some people live in certain areas where they'll be ostracized. Some people work in certain areas. I fortunately work in the IT consulting industry. They just need people all the time. So they're a lot more accepting of in fact, every consulting company I work for even happens to have LGBT communities that organize events and stuff like that. So I know I could freely talk about who I am, and so and when I do speak this way and say that I'm open, and I do encourage other people to be open about it in order to hit that point of normalizing it, I do at the same time understand there's some people who actually can't.
Yeah.
If the only reason you're not doing it is because you're embarrassed, I'm like, okay, maybe explore, trying to understand what's leading to that embarrassment and get around it. If you're not doing it because it's truly detrimental to your life, yeah, I get that. Let the rest of us fight for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for doing that. I mean, I love that you've had that sort of introspection to say, I can and I'm going to, because it's not always that easy, right? Even those of us that can, it's still scary for I think probably all of those conditioned reasons that we were just touching on. So I'm grateful that you are out there, open to talking about it and open to being as honest and transparent about it. So that's amazing.
Yeah. But it's about breaking stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And and I did mention, one of the things that led to my breakup with my co-parent was that I went through a depression, and that period taught me a lot about stigma.
Yeah.
Because when I was going through it, I was initially really embarrassed or afraid to talk about it, because once again, being raised by baby boomers, and being part of Gen X, we're taught that, like, oh, that's weakness. But what I learned through that period was, the more I started to talk about it, the more I learned, how many people were going through it with me. So that's, that taught me about, how damaging stigma is. So when we look at non-monogamy, it's like, why should there be there's absolutely no reason that there should be a stigma about the idea that that you can share love with so many people and give the gift of love and give the gift of caring and affection with so many people. Why is that a bad thing? It's but yet I thought about that a lot. I remember it's funny, once I was watching Lifetime TV, and it was one of these dumb movies about this airline pilot who had two different families. And of course, they paint him out to be the villain. But when you watch the movie, you see he's giving so much to each one of those families. They don't know about each other. Yeah, it's dishonest, and there's a lot that's wrong with that dishonesty. But at the end of the day, he's dishonest because that's what society trained him to be. Yet he was giving so much of himself, and of course in the end loses everything. But we're supposed to look at this guy as the villain, and I'm like, this guy just cared about everybody. And and it made me think about this problem in traditional culture, where people believe that, like, okay, you can only love one person at a time, otherwise you don't truly love them. Do you really have to carve up your love like that? And I'm like, no, it's not a zero sum game. In fact, my favorite phrase is, love is an unlimited resource to be given freely and recklessly, and you don't even have to expect anything in return.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that. And it's the the paradox there is then that the limiting factor is time, right? And how do you divide up infinite love with finite time? And it's a battle some days, most days, I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's been said that polyamory is just a bunch of people with a scheduling fetish.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It is that. That's for sure. There's an art to the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all, like everyone says, we have infinite love and not enough time.
Yeah. I'm curious, Danielle, how sort of from that point you've kind of talked through, the sort of this period of travel and a lot of the travel and how that wove into what sounds like a really amazing kitchen table poly dynamic for you. And where has that journey sort of gone, moving forward?
My partner was with myself and G for a few years. And then at one point, I started dating somebody. We'll call her H. So I dated her for a couple of months, and then we decided we're better off as friends. But we all started hanging out as friends. In fact, that my second date with H, my partner also came along because she wanted to meet her, and they got along really, really well, which didn't surprise me for what unfolded in the future, because later on we were the four of us hanging out together, and we went to hang out with another one of G's friends. Let's call her I. And we were all hanging out together, and that would happen for a while. And this was somebody that G dated once. He went on one date, and they decided they would just be friends and everything. So they were friends for a while. And after a while of hanging out, there was one night that I remember I was finally home for a week, and I said to everybody, "Hey, I finally have some time at home. I want to hang out with everybody. Let's go to karaoke in K Town." So we do that, and while we're all hanging out there that night, actually it was just the four of us. It was my partner, myself, G, and I. And it turns out I realized, I looked at I said, I think I like you. What do you think about that? And they're like, well, I'm not sure about that. But then we started dating for a while. And then at one point, my partner decided she liked H. And so they were dating. And then all of a sudden, almost immediately, G was starting H. So you could see, the whole polycule forming. And it was feeling really good for a while. I mean, we even went on vacation together. We went on
all five of you.
All five of us went on a post Labor Day vacation together. But this is where in hindsight, I realize I look at this situation in hindsight, and I realize a lot about myself and how. Shortly after that, little by little, the polycule did split up, because I guess after that one situation of everybody really, really getting to see, what it's like to spend extended time, and realizing that, in many ways, like, we had different goals, and I'm not going to go into any details out of respect for everybody else. But what I will say is, looking back, I realized, at that point, my beliefs were just way too idealized. I was just like, this is wonderful. This is the kind of thing I want. Not everybody was feeling that way. In fact, the reality was that I was really solo poly, and this became overwhelming. And I look in hindsight, I was a big part of that becoming overwhelming. It really teaches you a lot about yourself as to how to not just be more sensitive to how you're going to be in sync with other people, and figure out, okay, is this really a match? And yes, I love kitchen table poly, but does every situation have to be kitchen table? No, not really. I mean, it's wonderful if it is, but it doesn't have to be. So yeah, that was that part of the journey. At one point, it did get to that point. It would be nice if something like that does happen again in the future, but I mean, if it doesn't, that's okay too.
I just have to comment on this vacation where you went for all five of you. I just have to feel like I would love to be a fly on the wall watching all of those interactions, because so much is there, right? And like you said, it showed you all some different experiences, and not necessarily bad, but different lenses on things.
I was going to say, if you want to be a fly on the wall, I'll tell you, a couple of interactions that would really paint a picture. One was, we spent a lot of time building a 1,500 piece puzzle on the floor, all five of us. The other times was all of us literally in the kitchen, cooking breakfast, or we all went to the supermarket shopping together. And of course, whenever we do that, I like to do the little thing of put the pineapple in the shopping cart upside down and see if that gets a reaction. Spoiler alert, it never does. So being that, there's of course the intimacy and everything that happened. That, like I said, out of respect, I'm not going to get into those details.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we did a lot of activities like together was was really what was like really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I think, to your point, and I think, well, the reality, right, is any relationship, let's say with two people, over time, we grow as individuals, and we may not necessarily want the same things, 10 years from the time we started dating, or even a year from there, or from when we got together. And you take 5 people and you mix them all together with various webs of, interwoven relationships. The reality, or the likelihood that over time that you're all going to grow wanting the same things, the very, very slim chance of that being the reality. And so having to let go of a little bit of, a lot of the control, and just saying, we just have to let it be and see what we can do. And then we take those relationships for what they are.
Yeah. Finn, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a fundamental that, like, once you start to grasp that, it could really change the way you approach relationships. The fact that we all change, we all are very different people, we're all always growing. And this narrative in monogamy culture, that you're supposed to find that one person, they're supposed to be everything to you, the be all and end all of everything, and you're supposed to be with them forever, and they're supposed to be the one, the perfect one. And if at any point that breaks down, you basically just failed at life. That whole narrative that we're fed, which ignores the fundamental human nature that we all change. It's no wonder, like, half the population's in therapy, right? We set this up, don't we? But I like to think of, for me, the way I approach my relationship orientation now is that relationships don't actually end; they just change. And it's okay that, like, if you spent time with somebody, and for this point in time, it's like things felt really good about, they felt really good emotionally, they felt really good physically, and then all of a sudden one day it's like, okay, it's different now. Yeah, we don't recognize it right. There's a period of time where we have to, like, where we have to notice what's going on and then emotionally adjust to it. But over time, it's like, okay, it's okay if it's not that anymore. It could be something else. And also, don't close the door on the fact that it could be that way again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all do change, and that's normal. And I think if people were more accepting and understanding of that and approach relationships from that point of view, it's like you would be. I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you, actually, at how many people look at my ex, and I, my co-parent and I, and see how, we're still friends. And in fact, she's watching my house while I'm here in Mexico for me. And we still share a lot of things, and people look at that and like, oh, that's not normal. How can you do that? I'm like, why is that not normal? What's wrong with that? Okay, yeah, we're not together, we're not intimate anymore, but we had 18 years together. Do you just throw that away?
Yeah, and you're two people with respect for each other, and you can figure out how, whatever, like, you have managed to transition that relationship, change that relationship into a way that works for you both now, where you're at today.
Right. And I'm not going to pretend it was like, it was all a bed of roses and that happened. No. No, there were tough times. There were times where we were angry at each other. It happened, but the focus was always on wanting to get to a certain space, and so and that's where we are.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's, the question, right? Well, that's not normal, or the declaration, but to be able to be like, yeah, maybe it's not, but like, how fucking cool is it that I can call up my partner of 18 years, my co-parent, and say, hey, I'm going out of town. Do you want to watch my place? And who knows, maybe that even bails them out, right? They're like, great, I was needing a place to live, or this is an upgrade for me. Everybody can win. And when we do things that are a little bit abnormal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess another topic I was interested in talking about was like, I think we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but and I mentioned, like, sometimes if I find myself in a conversation with somebody and I start talking about, non-monogamy, and I get the typical reactions of, oh, I could never do that. Oh, there's always that triggering statement for me. I don't like to share. And my response is, well, you can't share what you don't own. I don't share people. I share my time with people, right? Which is a fundamentally different thing. But and here's another, like, another uh, another growth opportunity for me was when I began to realize, when I'm talking to people and I was like getting a little triggered by that, I began to realize, wait a second, I shouldn't really be getting upset with them, that's their reaction. That's what they were programmed to do. That's and so instead I started pivoting it to basically trying to help them understand, okay, okay, try looking at this from a completely different point of view. Try forgetting everything you think you know about relationships or thought you know. Pretend you were a blank slate, and that's a difficult exercise for most people. But I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, isn't that what critical thinking is? Critical thinking is trying to approach something without any biases, from a complete outside point of view. So, this is how I try to help people understand, what, if, my relationship orientation and my lifestyle. It's, why do I view things this way? Why do I view sexuality differently? That to me, you know, having sex doesn't mean all of a sudden you like have created this this hold on this person, where like now all of a sudden it's this, you cross this barrier and like things will never be the same again. I mean, no, sex is like a lot of other activities. I like to think about dancing. All right, you could dance with a person you're deeply in love with, and that dance is really, really special. And then you can go out dancing with your friends and be goofy, right? And that's also lots of fun, and it's also special in a different way. But is it now all of a sudden, just because you dance with that one special person, you're not allowed to go dancing with your friends anymore? You're not allowed, and but you talk about it that way, and then people say, well, but that's dancing. We're talking about sex. I'm like, yeah, but why do we have to treat sex differently? The only reason is we were taught that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to your point too, right? You go out dancing with your friends and you dance with some random person. You didn't leave there going, well, we must now dance together every dance forever and ever. Like we were able to dance tonight, and later maybe we text each other the next day and say, hey, that was a hell of a fun dance. Hope to see you in a month. Right? As long as you both have that expectation that you can communicate at the front of it, saying, hey, I'm here to dance with you tonight, and I'll text you tomorrow, and we may never see each other again. And they go, that's not a way I like to dance, so I don't want to dance with you that way. Like, you can translate it to anything, and I think that's brilliant that you draw that parallel. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's funny I draw that parallel because I'm actually a pretty awkward and uncomfortable dancer, but
Join the club.
But it was a good example.
but the metaphor works. So
Yeah. I love that you touched on that too. And I guess I'm curious a little bit to continue the story, jump back into the story.
Mhm.
You moved to, I guess, the 5-person polycule kind of dissolved and
transition.
Yeah, changed.
Yeah.
Dissolved from what it was into something different. And over the last, I guess I don't know exact timeline, but over the last few years, then where has that led you?
Last year,
The last year, okay,
year, almost year and a half.
Yeah, where has that led you?
Well, honestly, I've had to go through a long period of self discovery. It's I would say I probably gone in and out of some depressed periods again. For a number of reasons. First, once again, having a job that had me travel so frequently takes me away from situations and also, wanting to have other relationships. But one of the real problems with polyamory is that the dating pool is really, really small, and people would be surprised at which areas actually tend to have the higher poly population than others. Everybody thinks, oh, you live in New York, you live in Brooklyn. It's like, oh, you must have all options here. Well, not really. I mean, there's a poly community in New York, but it's also, it's not as big as everybody thinks. It's also, if you do the Venn diagram of BDSM and poly in New York, it's it's not quite a circle, but it's pretty damn close, to being so it's, and I'm not really hardcore BDSM. I mean, I've dabbled in a little bit. I'm like, okay, to each their own. Not really my thing. I'm more into the relationship side of it. So it kind of makes it hard to find people who want to have relatively vanilla poly relationships. So the dating pool's even smaller at that point. So, but then while traveling around, I've tried to understand like where the poly community is better. And one of the areas I actually had positive experiences after spending a very short amount of time was actually on the West Coast. I remember I was out for a Microsoft conference in Seattle once, and I met somebody there on field, and that was a nice experience. In fact, that night that we met, we're sitting having a drink, and she asks me, can I ask you something? Can I ask you something very forward? And I got to tell you, I love it when people ask me that, because I know I'm going to love what comes next. But but she said, I heard that there is a sex club near here, and I didn't want to go by myself, but, I wanted to go and watch and see what it's all about. Would you be willing to go with me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And, thank you for asking. And, and we start walking to a car. I said, and like, let's, we'll talk about ground rules, what we're looking to do here. Basically we did mostly just go to watch. It was the fact that was, I found a short time was in Seattle, it was easier to connect to somebody. And then there was also somebody else that I met actually at an event in the city. My partner and I were going to a couple of play parties in the city, and one of them actually had this social event that happens in between, which is just basically people just meeting and getting to know one another. And we met somebody there, and the attraction was instant. Turned out that she was living on the West Coast at the time too. But when I had to go out to Seattle again for a Microsoft conference, I called her. I'm like, hey, I could hop over to San Francisco for a day or two, and like I said, the energy and the connection felt instant. So it made me wonder, do I really belong on the West Coast? If I've been, I've been spending all this time on the East Coast, but when I go there, it's like, it just feels like, those are my peeps.
Yeah.
And so there's that. Now, fast forward now to where I am now. Right now, as I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, experimenting with life as a digital nomad just to escape the New York winters. And before coming down here, I got on a couple of WhatsApp groups to try to like see what's down here. And of course, I asked, are there any poly groups? And I actually connected with one right away. And it turns out they do play parties. In fact, there is one tonight. But they actually, the first one I attended was the day I literally came off the plane, checked into my Airbnb, took a 1 hour nap, and then got ready and went out. And so my whole thing is, at a lot of these parties, it takes me a long time to get comfortable actually playing. I really just want to like go and like meet people, and like, I just, people who are, just basically like-minded people who understand me, I understand them. In a short time, I met quite a few wonderful people down here that I know they're going to be lifelong friendships who like we're just on the same page about everything. And whether or not anything gets intimate, I don't even care about that anymore. I just like the fact that like I'm comfortable around these people that I just met, and instantly that okay, that this is the type of community you want to be around.
Yeah, I want to pick at this for a moment, Daniel, if you're okay with it, because I think there's a few things in here that are really, really gold.
Yeah.
And one of those is it sounds like you've really decentered sex. That really, it's, if I show up in a space, I'm going to be there to be interested in people, be interested in sharing about myself and be authentic and build friendships and community. And if sex maybe happens, bonus, but that's not, like, you show up with a bit of the less, I want to say, desperation. And I think as a male, right, as men in this world, I think that's a really powerful way to navigate this, because there is so much, I think, stigma around that's what men want, that's what they're here for, and that's what they're going to push for. And if you can show up and be, I'm just here to make connections and make friends, like, it's a totally different vibe that people pick up on.
Finn, that's interesting you picked up on that, because if we would have had this conversation 2 months ago, I probably would have sounded a lot more desperate. I probably would have been desperate. And I think it's ironic that we're having this conversation right now, because a big part of the blues I've experienced over the past year was that, like, I was not getting the physical intimacy and physical attention that I so craved.
Yeah.
And somewhere, like, you know coming down here was not just to escape the winter, but like this was also a healing journey for me. And it's and I would say that switch probably flipped maybe sometime in the past week or so.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's and I don't know how or why. I haven't figured that one out yet. But normally, most of my life, I was a very hypersexual person, and I like to think of myself that way, because I just I like physical intimacy. I like being touched. I like having people's hands on me. I like I like feeling contact, and not having that would normally be very I just feel like there's something missing. It's there's a loss there, but getting to a point where, like, I'm actually getting to be okay if it's not there on demand. And I guess you're right. It's there's that lack of desperation that may ironically lead to it happening more. But yes, I think it's interesting you picked up on that.
Well, I'm really grateful that you share that, Daniel, because I wanted to draw the clarification between, it's not that it's not something you desire or that it's even a big part of you, but that you're able to still go to spaces and hold that true, that, like, I would love it to happen, but I don't have to be wearing it so far out on my sleeve that that's the only thing that people can feel about me, is that I want some sex or I want some physical touch. And it actually, the first time I thought this was when you mentioned what happened in Seattle, where you were at a work conference. And throughout the course of interactions with somebody, she invited you to a sex club. And there's a part of me that's like, did that come completely out of the blue, or had you just sort of been open about who you are and the way that you relate? And that was sort of what opened that door? Because to me, that was another place where you didn't sound desperate, but she invited it.
Well, so first off, like I said, we met on Field, and
Okay.
you say what you need to say in your profile on Field. Okay.
Gotcha. I think I missed that part. I thought you had,
Yeah.
like, met her through work and you were just, like, sitting at the conference dinner and she's
Oh,
like, "Hey, was thinking about heading to a sex club. You want to head over there?" I think I missed that
oh,
segue. So
yeah. Oh, no worries. Yeah. So, but yes, I mean, the fact that that we met, like, there was already, like, a presupposition of who we
sure.
were and everything. I've also always had this other issue. I'm hyper committed to consent culture. It's when I say hyper committed, I mean it means I sometimes take it to an extreme, where sometimes I'm compelled to not even ask, because I'm afraid of making somebody uncomfortable by simply asking. And I also end up missing signals all the time. So, I love it when people are forward with me, because I miss the signals all the time. So incidentally, my partner right now, she's autistic, and a couple of people I met down here, within the E&M community, are also autistic. And I've got to tell you, I've learned a lot about interacting with autistic people through my time with my partner. And I have to tell you, I really, really love autistic people, because they are direct. All right. One of the things that really bothered me about being in traditional monogamous relationships is when you have that subtle argument, or you do something that your partner doesn't like without knowing it, and they're just walking around with that frown or kind of like, being distant, and you're like, what's wrong? And they say, nothing. And I'm like, no, really, what's wrong? Nothing. Don't worry about it. Okay. That doesn't happen with autistic people. With autistic people, it's just like, yeah, you did this and this bothers me, so let's talk about it. And I love that. So yeah, I don't know how I pivoted to that point, but yeah.
No, but I think it's more relatable than Daniel. The statements that you made in there, I'm like, when you said you're like so hyper focused on consent that you will often let things pass because you definitely don't want to make somebody uncomfortable, or you miss the cues that maybe they were okay with it, but it's still too terrifying to even acknowledge it. I might know somebody like that.
Yeah, somebody in a mirror or something. But
Yeah.
I was I'm gonna say it's funny. It's like, so last weekend, I was out with a bunch of friends doing karaoke, late at night, and a bunch of other people come in that I happen to recognize from the play party, and we're having a good time. And at one point, everybody takes their shirts off, and one of the women that I knew from the play party says to me, I'm not a big guy, I'm only 5'8" and everything like that, but I take my shirt off, and she's just like, "Wow, you look good." I'm like, "Well, thank you." Meanwhile, like her two partners, are both pretty buff and everything like that. I'm like, wow, this is a nice signal and everything. But I wasn't thinking much of it. We were talking a lot, right? I mentioned a couple of things that I talk about in this podcast that I normally talk about with everybody. And then, a couple of days later, on WhatsApp, I noticed that, that she liked a bunch of posts I made on the poly groups and everything. And I'm just like, am I missing a signal here? So lo and behold, I said, okay, don't be stupid. Don't miss another signal. So we're having brunch on Sunday, so.
Yay!
So I'm just curious, how did you ask, or did you say something to like, hey, I don't want to, like, I tend to miss these signals, or how did it come up? I'm curious what your approach was.
I honestly just a very subtle approach. I said, I asked if she was going to be at the party tonight. She said, no, not this one. I'm like, oh, darn, I was hoping that we could continue our conversation, and, perhaps we can get together later this weekend or next week. And she said, Sunday's good. And I'm like, okay, how about brunch? And that's how that happened. So I was very, very subtle, just, like I said, I need to get over this. I know I need to get over this because most people in this community, they're used to you being direct. And I want people to be direct to me, yet I'm not being direct because, out of concern for their own feelings. And I said, I realize that's something I need to get past.
Walking that line and figuring that out is so hard.
It's such a balance.
Yeah, a balance of like, I want to be direct. I want to make my desires known and my interests known and everything. And I don't want to cause this person to be uncomfortable. I don't want to like create this narrative for them, whatever's going on. Like, there's so many. Threading that needle is really hard.
Talk about a 1,500 piece puzzle. That's your fucking puzzle right there.
Okay. Way to come full circle, Finn.
I'm here for you.
So.
Yeah. It sounds, what I love is that you've shared so much about your journey, but then it's like, oh no, I'm still here figuring it out every single day. Like you said, some things have just shifted for you in the last couple weeks. And like, that's just a testament to the nature of human growth and change.
Mm-hmm.
And as we go through life, and relationships may come and go depending on how you change and grow as individuals, but that doesn't mean that you can't figure out the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. And that's just such a beautiful, so much of what you shared is just like frames that in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, every day is growth. I can't promise that, like, that I'm a better person than I was yesterday or even last week or maybe even last month, but definitely since last year. There's always that focus on growth. I think that's important. No matter who you are, and it's interesting. I do want to say this. Since I started listening to your podcast is that the reason I wanted to come on and speak was after listening to your guests, because for a while I've always tried to find forums where I could communicate with other people, and I got on a bunch of the Facebook polyamory groups, and I find most of the time it's really lots of people basically posting like how they're upset that this happened, they're upset that that happened, and you read everything and you realize that they're not really poly, they're just they're dipping their toe into something because they're trying to, they're compromising their own values because they're trying to make something work. And I'm like, where are you going to find these people? And then I started listening to your podcast, and it's just, more than half the guests I listen to, I'm kind of like, oh wow, that's me. Oh wow, that's me. Oh my goodness, I get it. Oh wow, that's me. And so that was why I was excited to come on and talk to you guys, because I'm like, wow, you guys get it.
Well, and to prove your point, and you sharing what you shared, I'm over here going, wow, that's me. Wow, that's me.
And I'm sure people listening are probably relating to a lot of what you said too. That's me, and that's me. Like, there's like, that's what I love about sharing people's stories, is that somebody may listen and not resonate necessarily with most of your story, but like one thing you said, like that one thing really hit them. And then, other people will resonate with so much of what you said. And I love that, like, we just have exposure to different people's stories so that we can figure out what is more relatable. It I guess helps us figure out more of ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might not be all of Daniel, but you're an amalgamation of Daniel and 27 other episodes, and that would be your episode.
Or people you've met in life.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes, everybody has a contribution to make to who we are, in one way or another. It's really how we respond to that.
Yeah. This is a beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful that you reached out, Daniel, and I'm curious to you've kind of said, like, you're very out and open about who you are. How have people in your life responded to that? I know you've said some people are like, oh, that's not normal, or they've maybe taken little pokes at you, but all in all, how have you been received since you sort of blew the doors open on this, a few years ago?
We had the same thought at the same time. I'd love to know that too.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, obviously there's mixed reactions. I think one of the more interesting reactions I get is curiosity. I don't think I've actually ever. Well, let me rethink that. I mean, people I meet face to face, I don't think any, have really been harshly judged by anybody. But there have been times on dating apps where, like, I'm totally open about who I am on a dating app because I want to be honest. And sometimes people just swipe at the pretty pictures, and then when a conversation starts and they realize who you are, I've actually had people match me on dating apps just to, like, just to go off on me and, like, and just criticize me for, like, and I'm and that used to really bother me. But then I basically came up with a phrase that helps me deal with that. The phrase is, basically, that sounds more like a you problem. But other reactions. So first of all, as far as my family goes, curiosity, acceptance, of course, I fundamentally live life from the point of view of so long as you're doing no harm, that's really the only moral you ever need. I, I I'm not a religious. I'm an atheist, so I never had to be concerned. I didn't grow up in a religious with a religious upbringing, so I never have to worry about that kind of judgment right away from immediate family members. So I take the perspective that so long as I'm doing no harm, I should have no problem being open about it. So, but that also means that I often surround myself by people who are more likely to understand that simple concept that so long as you're doing no harm. And so the reactions are mixed. A lot of the reactions are like, that sounds great, I wish I could do that. Of course, there's the perspective that a lot of people have where their initial reaction is, oh wow, that sounds great, so you could sleep with whoever you want to, that right? I'm like, that's not what it's about. I guess on one level, yeah, that's true, but no, that's not what it's about. It doesn't mean that like I'm jumping in bed with everybody. In fact, I need to feel a connection. I'm not a 20 something anymore that's locked and loaded all the time. I need to, feel some sort of connection. And you know it's interesting how with some people it just opens up conversations about, they want to learn more, they're curious, but they know they're never going to go down this path. They're already on the path they're on, and they're not going to change. So yeah, mostly curiosity is the reaction I get.
Yeah. Which in many ways is beautiful, right? That then you
Yeah.
get an opportunity to either engage or, maybe, I don't want to say educate, but you get to share authentically and they can take it or leave it. And yeah, I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing. I also love your phrasing of that sounds like a you problem. I had a coworker that I worked with quite a while that used to say that all the time. And every time he said it, I was like, damn it, that's some awesome boundaries. When like people are like shitting on you about something, you're like, and he would always just be like, well, that sounds like a you problem. And then he'd just like walk away. And I was like, man, like I need to take that one in more. So I'm glad it came back up here. So
thank you for sharing everything that you have today, Daniel. I really appreciate just you walking us through your journey, your story, and weaving in so many, I guess, amazing nuggets and thoughts throughout. It was just such a lovely conversation. I wanted to make sure, like, before we let you go,
to your sex party tonight.
Yes. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure to get out there or have a discussion around?
Ooh, is there? I don't know. I think I'm going through all the bullet points that I wanted to talk about. Uh, I guess just oh, well, yeah, I could talk more about this. How be becoming poly, or I shouldn't say becoming poly. Just basically abandoning monogamy and going through the exploration path I have. That, like I said, also brought me down a path of exploring anthropology and primatology and learning who we are as humans. Really had me deconstruct not just relationships and sexuality, not just those portions of life, but pretty much everything that that we were taught, almost everything that we were taught growing up, the way we were raised, the culture that we were forced to conform to. That's really opened up a window for me to really start questioning and deconstructing everything. And it's that in itself has been eye opening, because you begin to realize, well, if 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 this aspect didn't work for me, what else doesn't work for me, and what else it doesn't work for people as a whole. And it's, you could easily go down this rabbit hole. And but I will say, it's also at times made me feel isolated.
mm,
You sometimes get to that point where, like, you're looking at this, you're so sure that like everybody else has it wrong, which, when you start to think that, you gotta, like, the red flag should go up, because it's just like, wait, how can I be right, the only one who's right and everybody's wrong? That doesn't make sense at all. But you're so sure that everybody else is wrong that you begin to feel like, this is not the world I belong in, and you want to start exploring a little bit more. But I think part of the part of the pain that people can go through when transitioning to a non-monogamous life is the isolation. The irony is that you're living a life that enables you to be with more than one person romantically, yet there are times you could feel really lonely because you're living in a world that has not yet really accepted this. And the communities are really small and sometimes hard to find. And there's, just a much smaller pool of people that you can interact in, and that's a struggle. I think there's a lot of people that actually, decide they want to try polyamory and then go back, and they go back because of the isolation that they felt. Working through that isolation, is challenging. And I think for me, it's actually taught me how to learn how to be by myself a little bit better, which was something that was always hard for me because, growing up when I was in elementary school and junior high school, I was the one that was picked on all the time. I was the one that was always by myself. So, I never felt like I needed alone time. In fact, to me, alone time, was was torture. I remember when my daughter was younger, and my ex and my daughter would leave the house, and I'd have the house to myself. And most men are kind of like, "Oh, I have the house to myself. This is great." And I'm like, "No, this sucks. I got to get out of here." But learning how to deal with this like sense of isolation, learning how to like turn that back into like learning how to have a fulfilling life by yourself. And I think that's why there's so many people that actually have embraced solo poly, because once you develop that relationship with yourself, you're just more at peace overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, because it's like the sense of isolation that can come up with these things is just such an important point to know, and I'm so glad you did.
Well, and two, it's not. I think too, you talked about like the snowball effect of I deconstructed this norm. What other shit is fucked up in my world that I don't have to follow along? And I will just, Emma and I think had a bit of this through our working year when we were working our careers, where we weren't doing this save up and buy a house and have a family.
Mm.
And a lot of our friends were like, what are you doing? Like, I had coworkers being like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And we didn't really want to let the cat out of the bag of what we were doing, because we didn't want it to jeopardize the plan that we had to save up and quit working. And so we were sort of living this covert life, and it was a bit isolating. We could talk to a few friends about it, but even a lot of our friends were on that path that we weren't on. And so
anytime you do something that's not quite the norm,
you got to find your people, and it's freeing when you do. You find that community, and you're like, wow, I belong here. You fit in, and it's not the general population always, but it's these little sub communities that are really impactful when you find them. And I would say that's why we're such big proponents of find your community. And I mean, we have one, but we'll tell people all the time, go find yours. Is it multi-amories? Is it We Got a Thing? Is it a meetup group? Like, you find whatever community works for you and make it yours, because it is lonely if you're just sitting on an island by yourself, like trying to do this, whatever it is.
So true.
Well, another valid point, Daniel. Thank you. You keep knocking them out of the park. We appreciate it. I love this. This is fun.
Yeah, it's been such a great conversation. Thank you again for reaching out and for everything you shared.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. I wish I could have found this, 3 years ago when you started, but like I tell people all the time, it's a good thing I age slowly, because it takes me a long time to learn things sometimes. So.
Well, we're glad you found us, regardless of when, and we hope you're around for a while. So thank you for sharing your story, for sharing all of your thoughts and your growth with us. And I truly hope we get to have you back on in a bit and see where it's taken you.
I hope you have I agree with that. And I hope you have a wonderful night, and good luck at brunch this weekend too.
Thank you so much.
And we are back. Thank you, Daniel, for everything that you shared. Thank you for reaching out to us, coming on the podcast. We're just grateful for you. So thank you again.
Yes, Emma said it perfectly. Thank you, Daniel. We are super stoked to get your story out there, and we hope you had a hell of a good brunch and a great time at all of your Mexican fun fiesta parties. I was a little bit envious. I didn't get to go to any of them.
I know. I hope they were amazing.
We just had to sit here and have him tell us about all of the fun he was going to go have when we hung up the phone call.
Yeah, I hope it was wonderful.
I hope it was too.
A reminder, if you missed it, last Friday, an Ask Us Anything episode published where Finn and Miche answered your listener questions.
We crushed it.
So go back and listen to that episode. And next week, we have another interview for you.
We do. Next week, we're talking to Abby and Liam.
Yes.
Fantastic conversation coming to you all the way from around the world in Australia.
Yes, from some Aussies.
A beautiful conversation. And also one more time, thank you to everybody for helping us make it to 6 years.
Happy 6-year anniversary.
We wrapped it up. We made it to the end of the episode. Another one in the books.
We're so grateful for each and every one of you for being part of this journey with us. Thank you again. And with that, bye everyone. Thanks for listening.